My husband cheating with his employee to steal my family's company. I turned the tables, and now his fate hangs by a thread. I stood on the rain-soaked tarmac, watching my husband's private jet roar into the storm clouds, his laughter still ringing in my ears as he departed with his mistress on board. In that moment, the jet purchased with my father's company profits became the perfect symbol of Robert's betrayal. As the aircraft disappeared into the dark sky, I knew with absolute certainty. He expected me to chase after him to beg for his return. Instead, I pulled out my phone to charter my own flight to Dubai. I had everything I needed to ground him permanently. But my story didn't start here. It began 6 months earlier with my father's death, an inheritance that would change everything. The rain had pelted against the window of my father's hospital room as I clutched his hand for the last time. His fingers, once strong enough to build Hartwell Foods from nothing but a small sandwich shop into a regional powerhouse, now felt fragile in mine. The monitor flatlined, and just like that, I became both an orphan and the unexpected CEO of a multi-million-dollar company at 34. "Miss Hartwell," the hospital chaplain said gently, "would you like a moment alone?" I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. Dad had always told me I'd inherit the business someday, but someday was supposed to be decades from now, not after a sudden heart attack took him at 62. The first week after Dad's funeral passed in a blur of black clothes and casseroles. Robert, my husband of 8 years, handled everything, the funeral arrangements, the endless stream of visitors, even making sure I ate. "You don't need to worry about anything right now," he whispered, holding me each night as I cried myself to sleep. "I've got you." When Dad's attorney, Mr. Greenberg, called about the will reading, Robert took the day off from his accounting job to come with me. I gripped his hand under the conference table as Mr. Greenberg adjusted his glasses and began reading the document that would change everything. "To my daughter Sarah Elizabeth Hartwell, I leave my entire estate, including 100% ownership of Hartwell Foods Incorporated." Mr. Greenberg paused to look at me over his glasses. "Your father was very specific that the company should pass to you alone." I felt Robert's hand tighten slightly around mine. Dad had always been fond of Robert, but he'd never offered him a position at the company, despite Robert's not-so-subtle hints about wanting to leave his accounting firm. "The company needs fresh blood," Dad would say, "but family businesses need clear leadership." The weeks that followed were a crash course in food industry management. I'd worked summers at Hartwell Foods during college and had been handling marketing for the past 5 years, but suddenly, I was responsible for everything: supply chains, distribution contracts, personnel issues, and financial decisions that affected the livelihoods of over 200 employees. "You look exhausted," Robert said one night, massaging my shoulders as I reviewed quarterly projections. "Why don't you take a break? We could grab dinner at Antonio's like we used to." I leaned into his touch, realizing we hadn't had a proper date night in weeks. "That sounds perfect. Just give me 15 minutes to finish this email." Over candlelight and red wine, I felt like myself again for the first time since Dad died. Robert charmed me with stories from his office and made me laugh until my sides hurt. This was the man I'd fallen in love with in graduate school, supportive, funny, and able to make me forget my worries. "Thank you," I said, reaching across the table for his hand. "For everything these past months. I couldn't have managed without you." He smiled, but something flickered in his eyes. "Happy to help, though I wish I could do more than just be your shoulder to cry on. I've been thinking maybe I could help with the company finances, take some of the burden off you." I hesitated. Robert was brilliant with numbers, but Dad's warning about clear leadership echoed in my mind. "Let me think about it," I said gently. "Right now, I'm still figuring things out myself." As spring turned to summer, I slowly found my footing at Hartwell Foods. The company had been Dad's life's work, and I was determined to honor his legacy. We launched a new line of organic sauces that had been Dad's pet project before he died, and sales exceeded our projections by 30%. "We should celebrate," Robert suggested when I shared the good news. "This calls for champagne." That night, as we toasted to success, I noticed how genuinely happy Robert seemed for me. He'd been my rock throughout this transition, never complaining when I worked late or brought spreadsheets to bed. In that moment, I made a decision. Robert's 40th birthday was approaching in August, and I wanted to do something meaningful, something that showed him how much his support meant to me. After consulting with Mr. Greenberg about the legalities, I decided to gift Robert half of my shares in Hartwell Foods. "Are you certain about this, Miss Hartwell?" Mr. Greenberg asked, peering at me with concern. "Your father was quite adamant about keeping ownership within the direct bloodline." "Dad didn't know how essential Robert would become," I insisted. "Besides, we're family too." Mr. Greenberg prepared the paperwork with reluctance, and I planned an intimate birthday dinner at home to present my gift. I spent the day cooking Robert's favorites, beef Wellington with truffle mashed potatoes and chocolate soufflé, and set the dining room table with our best china. "What's all this?" Robert asked when he came home, eyes widening at the candlelit setup. "Happy birthday," I said, kissing him. I wanted tonight to be special. After dinner, I handed him a small box containing a vintage watch I'd found at an antique store. He admired it with appropriate enthusiasm, but I could tell he'd expected something different. That's when I pulled out the leather portfolio containing the share certificates. "There's one more thing," I said nervously. "Something to show you how much your support has meant during this difficult time." I placed the portfolio in his hands. "I want us to be partners in everything, including Dad's company." Robert opened the portfolio slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief as he realized what he was holding. 50% of Hartwell Foods, he whispered, looking up at me. "Sarah, are you serious?" Completely, I smiled. "You've been my rock. I couldn't think of anyone better to share this with." He surged forward to embrace me, lifting me slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. "You won't regret this," he promised, eyes shining with what I took for gratitude. "We're going to take Hartwell Foods to places your father never dreamed of." The change was subtle at first. Robert started coming to the office with me, sitting in on meetings, offering suggestions. The staff seemed to like him. He remembered everyone's names, brought donuts on Fridays, and stayed late to help solve problems. "Your husband's quite the charmer," Rita, my assistant, who'd worked for Dad for 20 years, observed one afternoon. "He's always been good with people," I agreed, watching through my office window as Robert chatted animatedly with our sales team. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs, the way Robert began scheduling meetings without consulting me, how he started using I instead of we when discussing company decisions, the subtle shift in how staff increasingly went to him with questions rather than me. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in his home office, door slightly ajar. "Don't worry about Sarah," he was saying in a low voice. "She's still dealing with her grief. Just send the proposal directly to me and I'll make sure it gets approved." I froze, hand raised to knock. Who is he talking to, and why would they bypass me on a proposal? Before I could process this, Robert continued. "The acquisition looks promising. With her father gone, there's nobody left who remembers the old handshake agreements. We can move forward without any complications." My chest tightened. "Acquisition? What acquisition?" I quietly backed away from the door, mind racing. That night, I lay awake beside him, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Dad's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. Family businesses need clear leadership. But Robert was family, my husband, my partner, my support system. Surely I was overthinking this. Yet, as I watched him sleep peacefully beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us, like the first tremor before an earthquake that would eventually leave me stranded on that rainy airstrip, watching my husband fly away with another woman. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Robert had always been ambitious. It was one of the qualities that had attracted me to him in the first place. His drive complemented my creativity, and together we made a good team. At least that's what I told myself as I dressed for work, carefully selecting a navy pantsuit that Dad had always said gave me an air of authority. "Ready to go, babe?" Robert called from downstairs. He'd started driving us to work together, another small change that had seemed thoughtful at first. Now I wondered if it was just another way to keep tabs on my movements. "Coming," I replied, taking a deep breath before heading downstairs. The subtle power shift at Hartwell Foods continued over the following weeks. Robert had converted a storage room into his own office directly across from mine, with glass walls that allowed him to monitor my meetings. He'd begun hiring new people without consulting me, including a striking marketing director named Vanessa Powell. "Vanessa comes highly recommended," Robert explained when I questioned him about it. "She worked wonders at Meridian Foods. Their market share doubled under her strategies." His hand rested possessively on Vanessa's shoulder a beat too long. "I'm sure she's very talented," I replied, extending my hand. "Welcome to Hartwell Foods, Vanessa. I look forward to reviewing your marketing proposals." "Oh, Robert and I have already drafted the Q4 campaign," Vanessa responded with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He approved everything yesterday." I maintained my professional smile while feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I see. Well, I'd still appreciate being kept in the loop on all major campaigns." "This is still my father's company." "Our company?" Robert corrected with a tight smile. "And of course, we'll keep you informed." That evening over dinner, I tried to broach the subject. "Robert, I felt blindsided today about the marketing plans. We need to make these decisions together." "Sarah," he sighed, setting down his fork. "You've been so stressed lately." "I'm just trying to take some pressure off you." "Vanessa has brilliant ideas, and I didn't want to bother you with routine approvals." "Routine approvals? The fourth quarter marketing campaign is our biggest push of the year." I struggled to keep my voice level. Dad always said marketing was the heartbeat of the company. Your father ran things his way. We need to evolve. Robert's voice took on a patronizing tone I'd never heard before. "Markets change, competition increases. We can't rely on outdated thinking anymore." The words stung like a slap. Dad had built Hartwell Foods through innovation and personal connections with clients. His approach wasn't outdated. It was the foundation of our success. Robert must have seen the hurt in my eyes because his tone softened. "I'm sorry that came out wrong. I just meant that together we can build on your father's legacy, make it even stronger." He reached for my hand. "Trust me, Sarah. This is what's best for the company." I nodded, swallowing my objections. But that night, I pulled out the company bylaws, reading until my eyes burned. As equal shareholders, Robert couldn't make unilateral decisions without my signature on major changes, at least in theory. In practice, he seemed to be finding ways around every safeguard. The following Tuesday, I arrived at the office early to find the conference room doors closed, voices murmuring inside. Through the frosted glass, I could make out Robert's silhouette alongside several board members and Vanessa. "Excuse me," I said, pushing open the door. The conversation halted abruptly. "What's going on?" "Just a quick strategy meeting," Robert explained smoothly. "Didn't want to wake you this morning. You were sleeping so soundly." "A strategy meeting that the CEO wasn't invited to?" I asked, looking around the table. Several board members, men who'd played golf with my father for decades, couldn't meet my eyes. "It was impromptu," Vanessa offered, her manicured fingers tapping a folder protectively. "We were just discussing preliminary ideas for the expansion." "What expansion?" The words came out sharper than I intended. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room before Robert stood. "Let's talk in your office," he suggested, guiding me by the elbow like a child having a tantrum. Once the door closed behind us, his friendly demeanor evaporated. "You're embarrassing yourself, Sarah," he hissed. "These people need to see strong leadership, not emotional outbursts." "Emotional? You're holding secret meetings about major company decisions without me." "It wasn't secret. It was preliminary. We're exploring acquisition opportunities in the Southwest. I was going to brief you once we had concrete numbers." "That's not how this works, Robert. We make those decisions together." His expression softened, but his eyes remained cold. "You're right. I apologize. I've been pushing too hard." He checked his watch. "Let me make it up to you. Dinner tonight at El Bernardine. We can talk through everything properly." I wanted to refuse, to demand answers immediately, but several employees were watching through the glass walls. Fine, dinner. But dinner never happened. At 6:30, Robert texted that he was caught in an emergency meeting with potential investors. When I called the restaurant to cancel, they had no record of our reservation. Our wedding anniversary the following week passed without acknowledgement. Robert claimed he'd been caught up in work and promised to make it up to me. Our favorite weekend traditions, Saturday morning hikes, Sunday brunches, gradually disappeared as he scheduled business meetings or golf outings with new clients. Home became an empty shell. We occupied the same space but lived increasingly separate lives. I'd wake to find his side of the bed untouched, a text explaining he'd crashed in his office after a late night. The few times we did share dinner, his phone buzzed constantly with urgent messages he needed to address. "I signed the Henderson contract today," I mentioned one evening, breaking the silence between us. It was a significant deal I'd been working on for months, one that would have made Dad proud. "That's nice," Robert replied, absently, thumbs flying over his phone screen. "Vanessa and I closed with Westmont Foods. They're considering acquiring our new sauce line for national distribution." My fork clattered against the plate. "Westmont Foods? They're our biggest competitor." Robert finally looked up. "Not anymore. Now they're our biggest opportunity for growth. Dad would never have partnered with Westmont. They undercut small businesses and use inferior ingredients. Your father isn't running this company anymore," Robert snapped. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, I saw Robert clearly for the first time since Dad died, a stranger wearing my husband's face. Later that week, I was searching for a missing contract in Robert's office when I found a hotel receipt tucked in his desk drawer. 4 nights at the Grand Hyatt. During the week, he claimed to be at a food industry conference in Chicago. The guest name listed Robert Hartwell and Vanessa Powell. My legs gave out and I sank into his chair, the paper trembling in my hand. A text notification lit up his desktop computer screen. "Can't wait for tonight." 5th that evening, I watched him pack his overnight bag. "Another late meeting?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. "Strategy session for the Westmont deal," he replied without looking up. "Don't wait up." I nodded, retreating to our bedroom, where I curled up on Dad's old armchair, the one piece of furniture I'd insisted on keeping after he died. Wrapped in the familiar smell of worn leather, I finally acknowledged what I'd been denying for months. The company Dad built was slipping through my fingers, along with my marriage. And the worst part was that I had handed Robert the tools to dismantle both. Morning came with a decision. I could either continue pretending everything was fine while my world crumbled around me, or I could fight for what remained of my marriage and my father's legacy. I chose to fight. I waited until Saturday morning when Robert was home, nursing his coffee and scrolling through emails. I placed his phone face down on the table, forcing him to look at me. "We need to talk about Vanessa," I said calmly. His expression flickered between surprise and anger before settling on something carefully neutral. "What about her?" "I found the hotel receipt, Robert. 4 nights at the Grand Hyatt with her while you were supposedly at a conference in Chicago." He didn't deny it immediately, which somehow hurt more than any lie could have. "It's not what you think," he finally said, rubbing his temples. "We were meeting with Westmont executives. The company booked our rooms on the same reservation with 1-room key." My voice remained steady even as tears threatened. Robert's shoulders slumped. "It happened once, Sarah. I was stressed about the merger negotiations. Had too much to drink. It was a mistake. Once?" I pushed the text notification screenshot across the table. He stared at it, then at me, calculation replacing remorse in his eyes. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I want more than empty words, Robert. I want my husband back. The man who held me through Dad's funeral, who promised to stand by me through everything." Something genuine flickered in his eyes, a brief glimpse of the man I'd married. "I don't know what's happened to me," he whispered. "The company, the power, it's changed me. Then let's fix it together." I reached for his hand. We could try counseling. His fingers tightened around mine. Yes, for us, for what we had. Dr. Jensen's office became our Tuesday evening routine for the next month. In that neutral space, with its calming blue walls and soft lighting, Robert seemed to transform back into the man I'd fallen in love with. Attentive, remorseful, committed to rebuilding our marriage. "I've ended things with Vanessa," he told me after our 3rd session, completely. "I've even reassigned her to our Minneapolis office." I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." For 2 weeks, things improved. Robert came home on time, we cooked dinner together, watched movies, cuddled on the couch, even resumed our Sunday brunches at our favorite cafe. At work, he included me in meetings, asked for my input on decisions, and stopped contradicting me in front of staff. "Maybe we're turning a corner," I told Rita one afternoon as she dropped off quarterly reports. She smiled, but her eyes held reservation. "I hope so, Mrs. Hartwell." I should have heeded the warning in her tone. The following Monday, I arrived at work to find Vanessa in Robert's office, their heads bent close together over spreadsheets. When I entered, they jumped apart like guilty teenagers. "I thought she was transferred to Minneapolis." I said after Vanessa left. The transition is taking longer than expected, Robert explained smoothly. She needs to train her replacement properly. That night I confronted him again. You promised, Robert. In counseling you promised you'd ended it, and I have. This is purely professional. The Westmont deal is complex. We need her expertise. Then why the secrecy? Why the guilty looks? Why lie about transferring her? I didn't lie. The transfer's happening, just not overnight. He threw up his hands. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You overreact to everything. Overreact? You're having an affair with a woman you hired behind my back, making business decisions without me, and I'm overreacting? He stepped closer, voice dropping dangerously. You have no proof of any affair. And if I've taken control of some decisions, it's because someone needs to think about the business instead of clinging to Daddy's outdated methods. The cruelty of his words left me speechless. This wasn't the man who'd held me while I grieved. This was someone else entirely. Someone cold and calculating who saw my pain as weakness. Despite everything, I couldn't give up. 8 years of marriage, the memory of what we once had, the dream of what we could be again, it all kept me fighting. We returned to Dr. Jensen, where Robert once again transformed into the contrite husband. I said terrible things, he admitted in session. Sarah's father was a brilliant businessman, and I was wrong to dismiss his legacy. Dr. Jensen nodded. Robert, can you understand why Sarah might find it difficult to trust your sincerity given the pattern of promises followed by disappointments? I do, he said, looking directly at me, and I want to prove myself. What if we plan something special for the company's anniversary next month? A celebration of your father's vision and your leadership. The gesture seemed so perfect, so thoughtful, that I allowed hope to bloom again. I'd like that, I said softly. Robert threw himself into planning the company's 35th anniversary celebration. He reserved the grand ballroom at the Hilton, hired Dad's favorite jazz quartet, and ordered a cake modeled after our original storefront. Every detail showed attention and care. The night of the event, I wore a midnight blue gown that had been my mother's favorite, her pearl necklace cool against my skin. Robert complimented me sincerely, his hand warm at the small of my back as we greeted employees and board members. Everything was perfect until the speeches began. Robert took the stage first, champagne flute raised high. 35 years ago, Frank Hartwell started this company with nothing but determination and a signature sauce recipe, he began. The crowd applauded warmly. And today, we honor that legacy by looking forward, which is why I'm thrilled to announce that Hartwell Foods will be merging with Westmont Industries. Gasps rippled through the room. My champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers. This partnership, Robert continued, will take us national, then global. And to facilitate this transition, I'm proud to announce our new executive team. I stood frozen as he introduced Vanessa as executive vice president and 3 Westmont executives as new board members. My name wasn't mentioned once. In one calculated move, Robert had announced a merger I hadn't approved and restructured the company without my consent. When he finally returned to my side, his smile was triumphant. Surprised? He whispered. How could you? My voice barely carried over the applause. The papers are already filed. Board approved it this morning in a special session. He clinked his glass against mine. Smile, Sarah. We're celebrating. That night, after mechanical goodbyes to confused employees, I locked myself in Dad's home office. With shaking hands, I logged into the company's financial system, accessing reports Robert thought I never reviewed. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Robert had been systematically moving company assets into new accounts where I wasn't a signator, small transfers at first, growing bolder over time. Most troubling was a newly formed offshore entity that now owned our patents and trademarks, including Dad's original sauce recipes. On paper, Hartwell Foods was becoming an empty shell, its value stripped away piece by piece. The realization struck me with physical force. Robert wasn't just betraying our marriage. He was orchestrating my complete removal from the company, ensuring that when he finally discarded me, I'd be left with nothing of Dad's legacy. Tears blurred my vision. But beneath the pain, something else crystallized, a cold, clear determination. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. Some things shouldn't be saved. This was about survival. I spent the night compiling evidence, downloading financial records, taking screenshots of suspicious transactions, and copying emails I'd been blind to before. By dawn, I had assembled enough evidence to show that Robert had been systematically looting the company. But confronting him with it would only warn him, giving him time to cover his tracks or accelerate his plans. I needed legal advice, but I couldn't risk using our family attorney who had clearly sided with Robert during the merger announcement. I remembered Elena Vasquez, a fierce corporate lawyer Mom had befriended years ago. I made an appointment for later that week, careful to use my personal email rather than my company account. Meanwhile, Robert seemed energized by his public coup at the anniversary party. He whistled around the house, treated me with exaggerated courtesy, and even brought home flowers one evening. We should take a trip, he announced over dinner 3 days after the party. Just the 2 of us. Dubai. The Westmont team is hosting a global food expo there next week, but we could extend it, make it a second honeymoon of sorts. I almost choked on my wine. Dubai. Now think about it. 5-star hotels, private beaches, shopping. You've always wanted to see the Burj Khalifa. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Plus, it would show a united front to our new partners. My mind raced. Was this an olive branch or something more sinister? The timing was suspicious, coming right when I discovered the financial irregularities. Then again, Dubai would give me access to Robert's new business partners. I could gather more information, maybe even evidence of his schemes. That sounds nice, I said carefully. When would we leave? Friday morning. The company jet will take us to the private airstrip outside the city, then straight to Dubai. He reached for my hand. I know things have been strained. This could be good for us. I smiled and squeezed his hand while my mind calculated frantically. This accelerated my timeline. I needed to see Elena immediately. I'd like that, I lied. The next morning, I claimed a dentist appointment and slipped away to meet Elena at her downtown office. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp as she reviewed the documents I'd brought. This is textbook corporate theft, she said, finally removing her reading glasses. He's systematically stripping assets while positioning for a full takeover. The merger announcement without proper shareholder approval, meaning you, is particularly telling. What can I do, I asked. Your father built in some protections when he established the company. Equal shares don't necessarily mean equal power. She tapped a clause in the original incorporation papers. There's a moral conduct provision here. With evidence of financial impropriety, you could potentially trigger a review that would return full control to you. How quickly could that happen if we file emergency motions? Days, maybe a week. She frowned. Why? We're leaving for Dubai on Friday. A second honeymoon he suddenly planned after I started looking into the company finances. Elena's expression darkened. That timing concerns me. Is there any way you can delay the trip? If I refuse to go, he'll know something's wrong. Then go, but be extremely careful. Keep gathering evidence, but don't confront him until we have everything filed and ready. And Sarah, she hesitated. Make sure your passport stays with you at all times. The warning sent a chill through me. What exactly did Elena think Robert was capable of? Friday morning arrived with ominous dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Robert seemed unusually attentive, carrying my suitcase to the car, holding doors open, asking if I wanted coffee before we headed to the airstrip. The weather report mentions possible thunderstorms, I noted as we drove. Will that affect the flight? We'll get out before the worst hits, he assured me, one hand resting on my knee. The gesture felt possessive rather than affectionate. The private airstrip was small, a single runway, a modest terminal building, and a few hangars. Our company jet waited on the tarmac, its steps already lowered, the pilot doing final checks. The first fat raindrops began to fall as we pulled up. Go ahead and board, Robert said, checking his phone. I need to make a quick call. I nodded and stepped out into the increasing rain, pulling my light jacket tighter. The wind whipped my hair as I approached the jet, my wheelie bag bumping over the uneven pavement. Before climbing the steps, I glanced back toward Robert, still sitting in the car. That's when I saw another vehicle approaching, a sleek black sedan that pulled up directly behind our car. The back door opened, and Vanessa emerged, her red dress vivid against the darkening sky, an overnight bag in hand. She hurried to our car, slipping into the passenger seat beside Robert. I froze on the first step of the jet stairs. Through the car's windshield, I could see them laughing together, her hand reaching up to stroke his face. Then Robert looked toward the jet, saw me watching, and his smile faded. He said something to Vanessa, then got out of the car, leaving her inside. Sarah, he called, jogging toward me as the rain intensified. I was just telling Vanessa goodbye. She brought some contracts I needed to sign before we left. The lie was so blatant, so insulting, that I couldn't even respond. I just stared at him, rain streaming down my face, mingling with tears I refused to acknowledge. Go on board, he urged, taking my elbow. You're getting soaked. I pulled away from his grasp. She's coming with us, isn't she? His face hardened. The Dubai team requested her presence for the marketing presentations. It's business, Sarah, in a red dress with an overnight bag. My voice was surprisingly steady. Stop lying, Robert. At least have the decency to tell me the truth. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a rumble of thunder. The rain was coming down in sheets now. Fine, he snapped. Yes, Vanessa is coming. The truth is, she understands this business better than you ever will. She supports my vision instead of clinging to the past. Our marriage vows? Were those just the past too? I asked. Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice, though the rain and thunder would have drowned it out anyway. Look, I was trying to be kind. Make this easy. We can still present a united front in Dubai. Settle everything quietly afterward. Nobody needs to know the details. You're asking me to fly across the world and pretend my marriage isn't over while you carry on with your mistress down the hall. Don't be dramatic. It's a business decision, like everything else. He glanced back toward the car where Vanessa waited. You can either get on that plane and maintain some dignity, or you can throw a fit and confirm what everyone already thinks, that you're too emotional for business. His words struck like physical blows. This was his plan, to humiliate me further, to use this trip to showcase my replacement both in the company and in his life. Sarah, a voice called from the terminal building. I turned to see Mike Davis, the airstrip manager who'd known my father, beckoning from the doorway. Storm's getting worse. You folks need to decide if you're flying out or waiting it out. Robert turned toward the car. We're leaving now, he called back, then looked at me. Last chance, Sarah, on or off. In that moment, everything crystallized. I stepped back from the jet stairs. I'll pass. Robert's face darkened. You're making a mistake. No, I said quietly. I already made my mistake, when I trusted you. He shook his head in disgust, then jogged back to the car. Within minutes, Vanessa had transferred to the jet, her red dress flashing like a warning signal as she climbed the stairs. Robert followed without a backward glance. The jet door closed, and I stood in the pouring rain, watching as the aircraft taxied down the runway and took off into the stormy sky, carrying my husband and his mistress toward Dubai. Mrs. Hartwell. Mike approached, holding an umbrella over my head. Let's get you inside out of this weather. The terminal building was warm and dry, the smell of coffee drifting from Mike's office. He handed me a towel and a steaming mug, concern etched on his weathered face. "Frank would have my hide if I let his little girl catch pneumonia," he said gruffly. "You okay?" The simple kindness broke something in me, and tears came in earnest now. "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." Mike awkwardly patted my shoulder. "Your dad was the best man I knew, straight shooter, fair dealer." He hesitated. "Never much cared for your husband, if you don't mind my saying so." A surprised laugh escaped through my tears. "Right now, I don't much care for him either." "What can I do to help?" Mike asked. "Need a ride back to the city?" I thought about Robert and Vanessa flying toward Dubai, confident they'd left me stranded and humiliated. They expected me to slink home, defeated, to wait passively while Robert completed his takeover of the company and my life. "Actually," I said slowly, an idea forming, "do you know anyone who could arrange a private charter? I need to get to Dubai." Mike's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "I've got connections at Regional Express. They've got a Gulfstream that could make that trip." He studied my face. "This about getting even?" "No," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is about getting what's mine." Mike's connections worked faster than I'd expected. Within an hour, a sleek Gulfstream G650 was being prepared for departure while I placed an urgent call to Elena. "I need you on this flight with me," I told her when she answered. "Robert's on his way to Dubai with his mistress. I'm following on a charter jet." Pause. "Sarah, are you sure about this? Flying halfway around the world in your emotional state?" "I've never been more clear-headed," I interrupted. "But I need legal counsel, and I trust you. I'll double your usual retainer." 3 hours later, Elena and I settled into the plush leather seats of the private jet. The storm had passed, leaving clear skies for takeoff. As we climbed through the clouds, I felt a strange calm replace the turbulent emotions of the past weeks. This wasn't about chasing Robert or saving my marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. "We have approximately 14 hours before we land in Dubai," Elena said, spreading documents across the table between us. "Robert will have about a 5-hour head start." "Good," I nodded. "That gives him time to get comfortable, to think he's won." Elena smiled approvingly. "I've been making calls. Judge Winters, she played golf with your father, has agreed to review our emergency motion immediately. If she agrees, and I believe she will, you'll have temporary controlling interest in Hartwell Foods by the time we land." "What about the offshore accounts? The trademarks he transferred?" "That's where this gets interesting." Elena pulled out her laptop. "Your father was more careful than Robert realized. The operating agreement has a provision that any IP transfer requires approval from all original shareholders or their direct heirs. Since you inherited directly from your father and these transfers happened after his death without your explicit consent, they're invalid." I finished, a spark of hope igniting. "But we need evidence that you didn't approve them." I pointed to my carry-on. "I've downloaded every email, every document I've signed since Dad died. Nothing about IP transfers." For the next 3 hours, we combed through paperwork, building our case piece by piece. Elena drafted legal motions while I compiled a chronology of Robert's deceptions. The pattern was damning, each step calculated to marginalize me while he consolidated power. "There's one more thing we should address," Elena said as we prepared to submit the emergency filing electronically. "Your marriage." My hand paused over the keyboard. Despite everything, a pang of grief hit me. "What about it?" "From a strategic standpoint, you should consider filing for divorce immediately. It strengthens your position regarding company control and prevents Robert from claiming marital assets if the court rules in your favor." The word divorce hung in the air. 8 years of marriage ending with a legal document filed from 40,000 feet above the Atlantic. Yet, the decision felt surprisingly easy. "Draft the papers," I said quietly. He made his choice at that airstrip. With our legal documents filed, Elena suggested I rest, but sleep was impossible. Instead, I began the next phase of our plan, gathering evidence of Robert's affair for potential breach of the moral conduct provision. I'd already saved screenshots of text messages glimpsed on his phone and photos taken at company events that showed his inappropriate closeness with Vanessa. But I needed more, evidence of their collusion in company decisions, proof that their relationship had affected business operations. I remembered Robert often working on his personal laptop, which synchronized to our home cloud storage. Had he been careless enough to leave a trail there? I logged in remotely and found a treasure trove of evidence. Emails between Robert and Vanessa dating back months before he hired her. Budget reallocations diverting funds from my marketing department to projects they controlled. Draft agreements for the Westmont merger with sections highlighting how to minimize my role. Most damning was a PowerPoint presentation titled Hartwell Restructuring with a slide labeled Sarah Exit Strategy. It detailed 3 options: buy out my shares at a fraction of their worth, create enough corporate pressure that I would resign voluntarily, or, the option marked as preferred, use the Dubai trip to negotiate a private separation agreement where I would cede control to avoid public embarrassment. My hands trembled as I downloaded everything, forwarding copies to Elena and to a secure email account I'd created. I was just closing the laptop when Elena returned from making calls in the private cabin section. "We have news," she announced, her expression triumphant. "Judge Winters has granted our emergency motion. Effective immediately, you have controlling interest in Hartwell Foods pending a full hearing." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means you can rescind any unauthorized decisions, including the Westmont merger announcement, and you can restrict access to company accounts." She handed me a sheaf of papers. "These need your signature. Then we contact the bank." By hour 10 of our flight, I had signed documents freezing the company's primary accounts, restricting Robert's access to corporate systems, and initiating a formal review of all transactions made without proper authorization over the past 6 months. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. "We should prepare a public statement," Elena suggested as we entered the final stretch of our journey. "Something measured but firm that establishes your authority without airing all the dirty laundry." I nodded, thinking of the loyal employees who had looked confused at the anniversary party. They deserved to know that Hartwell Foods wasn't being sold off to the highest bidder, that my father's legacy would continue. As I drafted the statement, my phone pinged with an email notification. Our IT director, responding to Elena's request, had tracked login activity on Robert's company accounts. He was currently accessing financial records from his hotel in Dubai, likely preparing for meetings with Westmont executives. "He has no idea what's coming," I murmured. "That's the advantage of being underestimated," Elena replied with a smile. The last hour of the flight, I changed from my travel clothes into a sharp charcoal suit, one my father had always said made me look boardroom ready. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat, my mother's favorite, drawing strength from these small connections to my parents. "You look formidable," Elena observed. "I feel it," I realized, surprised by the truth of it. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the hurt and betrayed wife had been replaced by something stronger, a woman who knew her worth and was prepared to fight for what was hers. As we began our descent into Dubai, I made one final call to Rita, my assistant, who had been quietly gathering information at my request. "Everything's set," she confirmed. "Security has been notified about restricted access to the systems. The board members will receive your statement at exactly 9 a.m. Dubai time. And I've contacted the conference organizers. They're adjusting the speaker schedule as you requested." "Thank you, Rita. I couldn't have done this without you. Your father would be proud," she said softly before hanging up. The Dubai skyline appeared through the window, the Burj Khalifa towering over the desert city. Robert had been right about one thing. I'd always wanted to see it, just not like this, not under these circumstances. Or perhaps exactly like this, on my terms, with my dignity intact, ready to take back what was mine. As the wheels touched down, my phone lit up with a text from the Hartwell Foods security team. Robert's access credentials had just been declined at the Westmont preliminary meeting. Soon his banking apps would show frozen accounts, his corporate email would display a lockout message, and waiting in his hotel room inbox would be my statement announcing the immediate termination of merger talks with Westmont and the review of all unauthorized transfers under his brief tenure. I smiled as I imagined his face when he realized what had happened. That I wasn't chasing after him, begging for reconciliation, that while he'd been flying to Dubai believing he'd won, I had been executing the checkmate move. "Ready?" Elena asked as the jet came to a stop. I took a deep breath, feeling a new sense of purpose settle over me. Absolutely. The cabin door opened onto the bright Dubai morning, and I stepped out into the sunshine, leaving behind the shadow of a marriage that had turned toxic. Ahead lay challenge and uncertainty, but also freedom. I was no longer fighting to save what had been lost. I was moving forward, reclaiming what was mine, and building something new from the solid foundation my father had created. For the first time in months, I felt like Frank Hartwell's daughter again. The lobby of the Grand Hyatt Dubai buzzed with activity as I strode through the gleaming marble entrance. The confidence in my step was new, a physical manifestation of the woman I'd become during that 14-hour flight. Elena walked beside me, legal documents tucked into her sleek briefcase. Her presence was both reassuring and formidable. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell are in the Westmont meeting in the Al Mansour conference room," the concierge informed us after a quick call. "Shall I announce you?" "No," I replied with a small smile. "I'd prefer to surprise my husband." We took the elevator to the third floor. The soft ping at each level matched the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, not racing with anxiety as it would have days ago, but strong and measured, ready for confrontation. Outside the conference room, I paused to straighten my jacket and touch my mother's pearls once more. Through the frosted glass doors, I could make out several figures seated around a long table. Robert's voice carried clearly, confident, almost gloating as he detailed plans for Hartwell Foods' future. "With the new distribution channels Westmont provides, we'll phase out the smaller product lines by next quarter. The original recipes can be modernized to appeal to broader markets." I pushed open the door. Every head turned as I entered, followed by Elena. Robert froze mid-sentence, his expression shifting from shock to confusion to carefully controlled anger. "Sarah." He recovered quickly, flashing that charming smile that had once made my heart flutter. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you until later." "Clearly," I replied, nodding politely to the Westmont executives who looked uncomfortably between us. Vanessa sat beside Robert, her red dress from the airstrip exchanged for a sleek business suit, her hand protectively close to his on the table. "Since you're here, let me introduce our partners from Westmont Foods," Robert continued smoothly. "We were just discussing the integration timeline." "There will be no integration," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "The merger negotiations with Westmont Foods have been terminated, effective immediately." Silence fell over the room. One of the Westmont executives, their CEO, judging by his position at the head of the table, leaned forward. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartwell, but your husband has already secured board approval for this merger." A board meeting called without proper notice to all shareholders, Elena stepped in, opening her briefcase. "In violation of company bylaws." "And who might you be?" the CEO asked with thinly veiled irritation. "Elena Vasquez, legal counsel for Hartwell Foods." She distributed copies of the court order to everyone at the table. "As you can see, Judge Winters has granted emergency relief, returning controlling interest to Ms. Hartwell pending review of numerous irregularities in recent company decisions." Robert snatched the document, his face darkening as he scanned the contents. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "I already have," I said quietly. "The company accounts have been frozen. Your access to corporate systems has been revoked, and the board has been notified of your immediate suspension, pending investigation into financial improprieties. The room erupted. Westmont executives huddled together, whispering urgently. Vanessa's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Robert and the exit as though calculating her best escape route. Robert pushed back from the table violently. "We need to speak privately," I nodded, following him to a small sitting area in the corner of the conference room, still within sight but out of earshot of the others. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, all pretense of civility gone. "Exactly what my father would have done," I replied. "Protecting what's mine. You'll regret this. I have contracts, agreements in place, unauthorized agreements made without proper approval." I leaned closer. "I found your Sarah exit strategy presentation, Robert. Very thorough, particularly the part about using this trip to pressure me into signing away my rights." His expression faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. "We could have done this amicably. Now you're forcing a public battle that will damage the company's reputation. Is that what you want?" "What I want," I said steadily, "is for you to step aside gracefully. Resign your position, agree to the divorce terms Elena has drafted, and walk away. In return, I won't pursue criminal charges for the financial manipulations we've uncovered." "You're bluffing," he scoffed. "What financial manipulations?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the evidence I'd compiled. Unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts, trademark assignments without proper approval. Shall I continue? The forensic accountants will find everything, Robert. As the reality of his situation dawned on him, I saw something I'd never witnessed before. Genuine fear in Robert's eyes. His carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing around him, each card bearing the name of a lie he'd told, a betrayal he'd enacted. "You need me," he said finally, his voice less certain. "The board trusts me. The Westmont deal can't happen without me." "The Westmont deal isn't happening at all," I corrected him. "And as for the board," I checked my watch. "They should be receiving my detailed report right about now, including evidence of how you've been systematically undermining the company since Dad died." From across the room, I noticed the Westmont CEO ending a phone call. His expression was grave as he whispered something to his colleagues. Their postures changed immediately, shoulders stiffening, faces closing. Robert saw it too. "What did you do?" "I protected our company, the way Dad raised me to do." I stood up. "Your return flight has been booked for tomorrow morning, first-class commercial. The company jet is no longer at your disposal. You can't just—" "I can. I have." I turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Robert, your company credit cards have been canceled. You might want to check your personal accounts too. It seems the bank had some concerns about recent unusual activity." I rejoined Elena at the table, leaving Robert standing alone, his carefully cultivated power evaporating in real time. The Westmont CEO cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mrs. Hartwell, in light of these developments, I think it's best if we postpone any further discussions." "Mr. Chambers, there's nothing to postpone," I replied firmly. "Hartwell Foods is not for sale or merger. However, I'd be happy to discuss potential distribution partnerships that don't involve corporate integration." He studied me for a moment, then nodded with what looked like respect. "Perhaps we can schedule that conversation for another time." As the Westmont team gathered their materials, Vanessa sidled toward the door, clearly hoping to slip away unnoticed. "Miss Powell," I called, stopping her in her tracks. "Human Resources will contact you regarding the termination of your employment. Please ensure all company property is returned before you leave Dubai." She flushed, glancing toward Robert, who stood frozen in place, still processing his fall from power. Without a word, she hurried from the room, loyalty evaporating in the face of consequence. When the last Westmont executive had departed, I turned to Robert. "You should know the locks at the house have been changed." "Where am I supposed to go?" he demanded, the entitlement in his tone almost laughable now. "That's no longer my concern." I gathered my things, prepared to leave him standing alone in the emptying conference room. "Sarah," he called as I reached the door, "I built that company with you. It's as much mine as yours." I paused, turning to face him one last time. "No, Robert, you tried to steal what my father built. There's a difference. I let the truth settle between us." "You're grounded, Robert, permanently." As Elena and I walked through the hotel lobby toward the bright Dubai sunshine, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time since Dad died, I felt truly capable of carrying his legacy forward while creating my own. "What now?" Elena asked as we stepped outside. I looked up at the impossibly tall Burj Khalifa stretching toward the sky. "Now we rebuild, my way." 3 days later, I returned to our headquarters, stepping into the familiar lobby with new purpose. Rita greeted me with a warm hug and a stack of messages. "The board wants to meet this afternoon. They've reviewed everything and are prepared to ratify your full reinstatement as CEO," she reported. And Mr. Greenberg called twice. Robert signed the divorce papers without contest. He didn't have much choice, I noted, glancing through the glass walls of what had been Robert's office. The maintenance crew was already removing his nameplate. "Your father's office is ready for you," Rita said, following my gaze. "Unless you'd prefer to keep yours." I considered the question. Dad's corner office represented tradition, stability, legacy. My current space reflected where I'd started in this company, the marketing department that had been my domain before all this began. Have them move my things to Dad's office, I decided. But first, let's call the design team. I think it's time for some updates. Rita smiled knowingly. Honoring tradition while embracing change. Exactly. I touched my mother's pearls, a tangible connection to my past. Dad built something amazing, but now it's my turn to lead. That evening, I stood at the window of the office that had once been my father's and was now irrevocably mine. The view of the city stretched before me, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. On my desk sat a framed photo of Dad at the original Hartwell storefront, his proud smile captured forever. Beside it, I placed a new frame containing the first executive order I'd signed today, the reinstatement of Dad's original sauce recipe with my own subtle enhancement. A blend of traditional and new that represented everything Hartwell Foods would become under my leadership. "Well, Dad," I whispered to the empty room, "I almost lost it all, but I think you'd be proud of how I got it back." The company phone rang and I answered with my new greeting. "Sarah Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Foods. How may I help you?" The storm had passed and I was finally flying on my own.